The space station hung in the darkness like a broken toy. Sanctuary 7 had been beautiful once, with its white metal walls and glowing windows. Now smoke leaked from its sides. Pieces of metal floated around it, spinning slowly in the emptiness of space. Inside, people were dying. Ambassador Rilvan pressed his thin fingers against the control panel. His 6 legs shook as another explosion rocked the station. He was old for a Velnari, his insect-like body covered in the pale green color that came with age. Today might be his last day alive. The attackers called themselves the Syndicate Collective. They wanted the terraforming technology stored deep in the station's vaults. Technology that could change dead planets into living worlds. Technology worth killing for. Rilvan had watched his security team fall one by one. The Syndicate had weapons that shut down the station's shields like turning off a light. Now they were cutting through the last doors between them and 200 innocent people. Researchers, diplomats, families. Even children. His hands flew across the controls. The main communications array was destroyed, but there was one backup system. One chance. He coded an emergency message with his security clearance and aimed it at the nearest coalition defense fleet. They were 3 days away. Too far, too late. But he had to try. The message shot out into space just as the communications room exploded behind him. Rilvan ran on his 6 legs, his old body protesting every step. He had done all he could. Now he could only wait for death or a miracle. The message traveled through the quantum relay network, bouncing from gate to gate. But the Syndicate's attack had damaged something. The signal scattered, taking wrong turns through the vast darkness. It missed the coalition fleet entirely and kept going, searching for anyone who could help. 4 light years away, Jake Morrison floated in zero gravity, holding a scanner up to a rock. The asteroid was boring, just iron and nickel, the same as the last 10 they had checked. He was 17 and starting to think that space exploration was less exciting than the movies made it look. The Pathfinder shuttle was small and cramped. 12 students and their instructor were squeezed inside, on a routine training mission that felt more like homework. Jake pushed off the asteroid and floated back toward the airlock. His brown hair drifted around his face in the weightlessness. Inside the shuttle, Maya Chen was studying alien biology on her tablet. Her black hair was pulled back tight and her dark eyes moved quickly over the screen. She wanted to be a doctor who worked on other planets, helping both humans and aliens. She had dreamed about it since she was 10 years old. Kyle Bennett sat in the pilot's chair, his feet up on the console. His blonde hair stuck up in every direction. He was only 16, but could fly anything with wings or engines. On Earth, he had raced airspeeders through canyons at speeds that made his instructors turn pale. In space, he was even better. Sophie Martinez worked quietly at the communication station. She was 17, with brown eyes that noticed everything. She could speak 5 Earth languages, and was learning alien ones too. Right now, she was practicing Velnari clicking sounds, trying to get the rhythm right. Carter Blake took up more space than anyone else. He was 18, tall and broad, with arms like tree trunks. But his face was gentle, and he always helped the younger students with their heavy equipment. He wanted to protect people. It was all he had ever wanted. The other 7 students were scattered around the shuttle. Nina Cross, small and quick, worked on repairing a broken sensor. Ethan Wright studied navigation charts. Lucas Grant, the youngest at 16, sketched engine improvements in his notebook. Zoe Palmer practiced hand-to-hand combat moves in the tiny cargo space. Alex Turner ran experiments on asteroid samples. Mia Brooks organized their supply inventory. Ryan Foster debugged a computer program. Lieutenant Commander Hayes watched them all from her seat near the airlock. She was 42, with gray streaking her red hair and tired lines around her eyes. She had seen combat once, years ago. She hoped these kids never would. The communications panel suddenly screamed. Sophie jumped, her hands flying to her headset. Red lights flashed across her screen. An emergency signal. Coalition military codes. Priority Alpha. Hayes was beside her in 2 steps. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. Sophie played the message. They all heard it, saw it. The video showed the attack on Sanctuary 7. showed people running and dying, showed the countdown to disaster. The shuttle went silent. Even the hum of the engine seemed quieter. Hayes checked the coordinates. 4 hours away at maximum speed. She checked coalition fleet positions. 3 days away. She checked their weapons. 2 small pulse cannons and some handheld rifles. Against an attack force that had crushed a defended station. She looked at her students. They were children. Teenagers playing at being space explorers. They had training. Yes, simulations. Classes. But this was real. This was people dying while they listened. Jake spoke first. His voice was steady, calmer than he felt. He asked the question they were all thinking. Could they help? Hayes wanted to say no, wanted to protect them, but she had been a soldier before she became a teacher. She knew what those people on the station were facing. She knew that 4 hours was the difference between life and death. She told them the truth. They were probably outgunned, definitely outnumbered. Not trained for combat. There was a very real chance they would die, all of them, and nobody would blame them for saying no, for letting someone else handle it, for being smart and staying safe. She gave them a choice. They would vote. Majority decides. And she would respect whatever they chose. Maya voted first. Yes. Her voice was quiet, but firm. She had taken an oath when she started medical training, to help people who needed it. These people needed it. Carter voted yes. His deep voice filled the small shuttle. He said he joined the academy to protect people. This was what that meant. Kyle grinned, though his hands shook slightly on the controls. Yes. He said someone had to fly them there. Might as well be the best pilot in the academy. Sophie voted yes, with a small nod. She did not trust her voice not to shake. One by one, they all voted. Nina, Ethan, Lucas, Zoe, Alex, Mia, Ryan. Every single one said yes. Jake voted last. Yes. He thought about his father, killed by pirates 3 years ago. Thought about how nobody had been there to help. He would not let that happen to someone else. Hayes felt her throat tighten. She was proud, terrified, but proud. She told Kyle to set course for Sanctuary 7. Maximum speed. The quantum drive hummed to life. Space twisted around them as they jumped. Inside the shuttle, the students prepared. They pulled out their training weapons and checked them. They studied the station's blueprints on their tablets. They tried not to think about the fact that in 4 hours, they might be dead. Hayes gathered them together. She reminded them of something important, something they sometimes forgot because they had grown up with it. Humans were different. Earth was different. Earth was a Class 9 death world. That meant it was one of the most dangerous planets in known space. Gravity almost twice what most aliens experienced. An atmosphere that could kill with storms and lightning. Predators everywhere. Diseases that jumped between species. Radiation from a harsh sun. Humans had evolved in hell. That made them tough in ways aliens could not imagine. Stronger bones from heavy gravity. Muscles built to carry more weight. Lungs that could work with less oxygen. Bodies that healed fast and fought off infection. Minds that expected danger and knew how to handle it. What felt like suffering to an alien might just be uncomfortable for a human. What seemed impossible to species from gentle worlds might be just another challenge to solve. The students looked at each other. They had known this in theory, had learned it in xenobiology class. But now it mattered. Now it was the edge that might keep them alive. Jake started planning. He was good at that, seeing patterns, finding solutions. He pulled up the station maps and divided them into sectors. They needed to know where the civilians were, where the attackers were, what paths were still safe. Sophie worked on cracking the station's communications. If they could tap into the internal network, they could see through the security cameras. Know what they were walking into. Maya prepared medical supplies. She did not know alien biology as well as human, but she would learn fast. She always did. The 4 hours crawled by. Some students tried to sleep. Some prayed. Some just stared at the walls and tried to stay calm. Hayes checked and rechecked their gear, looking for any advantage, any edge. Kyle sat in the pilot's chair, his fingers dancing over the controls. He ran simulations in his head, approach vectors, evasive maneuvers, docking procedures. He had to get them there alive. That was his job. The quantum drive shut down. Space snapped back to normal. They had arrived. Sanctuary 7 filled their view screen. It looked worse in person. Hull breaches glowed red where metal had melted. Debris spun in clouds around it. 3 attack ships clung to the station like parasites, their docking clamps buried deep in the metal. The station's power flickered. Lights went on and off in random patterns. Atmosphere vented from cracks, creating jets of frozen air that sparkled in the starlight. Kyle's hands moved over the controls. He wove the Pathfinder through the debris field, using the wreckage as cover. The Syndicate ships were big and powerful, but their sensors were not looking for. The station was dying. Jake could feel it in the way the floor vibrated wrong under his boots, in the flickering lights that cast strange shadows, in the taste of the air, metallic and bitter. They moved through the corridors in a tight group, weapons raised, eyes scanning every corner. Bodies lay in the hallways. Some wore the security uniforms of Sanctuary 7. Others wore the dark armor of the Syndicate. Nobody stopped to check them. There was no time. Sophie had her tablet out, fingers flying across the screen. She had managed to tap into the station's emergency network. Security cameras showed her grainy pictures of what was happening. She saw Syndicate soldiers everywhere. Saw 200 civilians huddled in the central habitat ring. Saw the plasma torches slowly cutting through the reinforced doors. She told the others what she had learned. The Syndicate had about 60 soldiers. They were split into 3 groups. One group guarded the docking bay where their ships waited. One group tried to break into the research vaults. One group prepared to breach the civilian safe zone. Hayes made quick decisions. They would split into 3 teams. Each team had a job. Jake, Carter, and Zoe would create diversions and take out isolated enemy patrols. Sophie, Nina, and Ethan would head for the communications hub and try to call for proper help. Maya, Alex, and Lucas would reach the civilians and start treating the wounded. Kyle, Mia, and Ryan had the most dangerous job. They would go to the docking bay and sabotage the Syndicate ships. Without their escape route, the attackers would be trapped. Trapped people made mistakes. Hayes would float between teams, coordinating and providing backup where needed. She knew it was a thin plan. Too many things could go wrong. But it was the best they had. Before they split up, Hayes reminded them one more time. They were stronger than these aliens expected. Tougher. More adaptable. The station's damaged sections would hurt the Syndicate but barely slow humans down. That was their advantage. They had to use it. The teams separated at a junction in the corridors. Jake watched the others disappear into the darkness. He hoped he would see them again. Jake's team moved toward the damaged sections of the station. The gravity was failing here, dropping to about 40%. The atmosphere was thin. Emergency warnings flashed on the walls, telling them the environment was dangerous. Lethal for most species. Jake put on a simple breather mask. Carter and Zoe did the same. They did not need full environmental suits. Their lungs could handle the low oxygen. Their bodies could adapt to the reduced pressure. Humans had climbed Mount Everest before they ever went to space. This was nothing compared to that. They found the Syndicate patrol exactly where Sophie said they would be. 4 soldiers in bulky environmental suits moving slowly through the damaged corridor. The suits were necessary for them. Without protection, the thin air would kill them in minutes. The soldiers were arguing about something. Their voices came through their suit speakers, loud in the quiet corridor. They did not expect trouble. Did not think anyone could move through this section without heavy gear. Jake signaled Carter and Zoe. They spread out, using the low gravity to move silently. Jake pulled himself along the wall, hand over hand, completely silent. He thought about all those hours in the combat simulator. Wondered if this would be anything like that. It was not. Carter moved first. He pushed off a wall and flew across the corridor in the low gravity. His momentum carried him straight into the first soldier. They went down together. Carter's earth-strong muscles, used to fighting gravity twice what the soldier had ever felt, made him immensely powerful here. He twisted the soldier's weapon away and struck him once. The soldier went limp. The other 3 soldiers spun around, raising their weapons. Too slow. Jake was already there. He had learned hand-to-hand combat from instructors who knew that humans might fight aliens one day. Knew that human fighting styles developed over thousands of years of warfare would seem brutal and strange to species that had no predators. He struck fast and hard. Used the low gravity to his advantage. Kicked off surfaces at angles the soldiers could not predict. Their suits made them slow. Made them clumsy. Within seconds, 2 more were unconscious. Zoe took the last one. She was smaller than the others, but fast. She got inside the soldier's reach, grabbed his weapon, and used his own momentum against him. The soldier hit the wall hard and stopped moving. 90 seconds. 4 Syndicate soldiers defeated in 90 seconds. Jake checked the soldiers, all alive but unconscious. He took their weapons and communication devices. Listened to their radio chatter. Learned that the Syndicate leader was named Vex. Learned that Vex had ordered his forces to kill the hostages if they met serious resistance. That changed things. They could not just fight. They had to be smart. Had to make the Syndicate think they were winning until it was too late. Across the station, Sophie's team crawled through maintenance shafts. The passages were too narrow for the larger Syndicate soldiers. Perfect for humans. Sophie led the way, Nina right behind her, Ethan bringing up the rear. The communications hub was heavily damaged. Someone had set charges to make sure no signals got out. Sophie looked at the wreckage and felt her heart sink. This was bad, worse than she expected. But Sophie had not learned 5 languages and alien communication protocols because things were easy. She learned them because they were hard. She pulled out her tools and got to work. Nina helped, her small fingers perfect for delicate repairs. Ethan kept watch at the entrance, his rifle ready. They worked in silence, racing against time. A Syndicate soldier appeared at the end of the corridor. He saw Ethan and raised his weapon. Ethan was faster. He dropped into a crouch and fired. His shot took the soldier in the shoulder. The soldier fell back, calling for help into his radio. Ethan sealed the emergency bulkhead, trapping the soldier on the other side. It would not hold for long, but it gave Sophie a few more precious minutes. Sophie's fingers flew across the damaged controls. She bypassed 3 blown circuits and rerouted power through the backup systems. The communications array flickered to life. Weak, unstable, but working. She coded a burst transmission. Human rescue team on site. Civilian extraction in progress. Request immediate assistance. She added their position and the number of hostages. Then she sent it toward the coalition fleet with all the power she could spare. The transmission lasted 3 seconds before the system overloaded and died. But 3 seconds was enough. The message was away. Help would come, eventually. They just had to survive until then. Maya's team reached the civilian safe zone through a service corridor. The doors were reinforced, designed to withstand attacks. Through the small window, Maya could see people inside. So many people. Aliens of different species huddled together in fear. She knocked on the door, showed her face in the window. After a long moment, someone opened it a crack. Then wider. The humans slipped inside and the door sealed behind them. The safe zone was chaos. Wounded people lay everywhere. The air was thick with the smell of blood and fear. Emergency oxygen generators struggled to keep up. The lights flickered constantly. Ambassador Rilvan approached them. His old body was covered in dust and minor injuries. He looked at the 3 young humans with confusion. Where was the rescue team? Where were the Coalition Marines? Maya told him the truth. They were the rescue team, students from Earth. They had answered his distress call. Help was coming, but not for hours. Until then, they would do what they could. Rilvan stared at them. Students, children, and they had come anyway. He did not know whether to be grateful or horrified. Maya did not wait for his decision. She started triage immediately. Alex helped her, pulling out medical supplies. Lucas went to work on the failing oxygen generators, his engineering skills put to immediate use. Maya worked fast, moving from patient to patient. Her medical training was for humans, but biology was biology. She could see what was wrong even if the details were different. This one needed oxygen. That one was bleeding internally. This child needed fluids. She found something surprising. Human blood plasma could temporarily help some of the alien species. The oxygen-carrying capacity of human blood was much higher than theirs. It bought them time. Not much, but something. Rilvan watched Maya work and felt his understanding of humans shift. He had read the reports about Earth being a death world, had dismissed them as exaggeration, but watching this young human work in conditions that had his own people gasping, watching her adapt and improvise, he began to understand. Humans were not like other species. At the docking bay, Kyle studied the 3 Syndicate ships through a vent grating. They were big, powerful, heavily armed, and currently unguarded except for a small security detail. The Syndicate thought their ships were safe. Nobody would be crazy enough to try to steal or sabotage them. Not with armed guards and security systems. Nobody except a 16-year-old human who had been flying since he was 12 and thought rules were more like suggestions, Kyle whispered, his plan to Mia and Ryan. They thought he was insane. He grinned and said that was probably true. But it would work. Mia would monitor the security feeds and create a distraction. Ryan would provide cover fire if things went wrong. Kyle would do the impossible part. Mia triggered a false alarm in a distant section of the station. The guards. The first wave of Syndicate soldiers hit the human defense line like water hitting rock. The soldiers expected to push through easily, expected fear and confusion, expected the defenders to break and run. They got something very different. Carter stood at the main entrance, a heavy plasma cannon braced against his shoulder. The weapon was designed to be mounted on a tripod. Too heavy for most species to carry. But Carter had grown up under Earth's crushing gravity. His bones were dense, his muscles thick with power. He held the cannon steady and fired. The plasma bolts cut through the Syndicate's energy shields like they were paper. Soldiers fell back, shouting in confusion. They had never seen someone use a heavy weapon like a rifle before. On Carter's flanks, Zoe and Ryan used guerrilla tactics. They would pop out from cover, fire a burst, then disappear back into the damaged sections of the station. The Syndicate soldiers tried to follow, but the environmental conditions drove them back. Thin air, failing gravity, temperature swings. Humans could operate there. The Syndicate could not. Behind the defensive line, the 200 civilians watched in stunned silence. They had expected coalition Marines, trained soldiers in powered armor. Instead, they got teenagers in light gear who moved like hunters and fought like they had nothing to lose. Ambassador Rilvan stood beside Hayes watching the battle. He asked her how this was possible. How could children hold off trained soldiers? Hayes did not take her eyes off the fight. She told him about Earth, about growing up under heavy gravity that made every movement a workout, about an atmosphere that forced lungs to work harder, about a planet covered in predators where humans were both hunter and prey. She told him that humans did not have thick armor or natural weapons. They had something better. They had endurance, adaptability, the ability to keep going when any sane species would quit. Humans climbed mountains that could kill them, swam in oceans full of creatures that could eat them, lived in deserts and tundras and jungles, survived. That was what Earth taught. That was what made humans dangerous. Rilvan looked at the humans fighting for his people and felt something shift in his understanding of the galaxy. These were not primitive aliens playing at civilization. These were survivors from a nightmare world who had learned to thrive in conditions that would kill his species in minutes. The Syndicate pulled back to regroup. The first assault had failed. Vex watched through cameras and felt anger burn in his crystalline form. He ordered a second wave. More soldiers. Better tactics. They would overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers. Jake used the brief pause to assess their situation. They had held the first assault, but barely. Ammunition was running low. Several students had minor injuries. The Syndicate could keep throwing soldiers at them. Eventually, the humans would run out of ammunition, run out of energy, run out of luck. They needed to change the game. Needed to go on offense. Jake looked at the station maps on his tablet and formed a plan. It was risky, dangerous, probably stupid, but it might work. He called Sophie and Ethan over, told them what he wanted to do. They would leave the safe zone through a service airlock, go outside the station, traverse the hull to get behind enemy lines. It would mean walking in the vacuum of space with nothing but their emergency suits and magnetic boots. Sophie looked at him like he was crazy. Then she checked the route and realized it could work. The Syndicate would never expect it. Never think anyone would be insane enough to try it. Hayes overheard the plan and almost said no. Almost. But she had learned to trust Jake's tactical mind, and they were running out of options. She approved it but made them promise to be careful. Jake promised, Even though they both knew careful had stopped being an option hours ago. The three of them suited up in the emergency spacesuits. The suits were thin, barely more than a layer of tough fabric with a helmet. Not the heavy armor that Coalition species used for spacewalks. Humans did not need as much protection. Their bodies were tougher. Their tolerance for radiation higher. Their ability to survive temperature extremes better. They cycled through the airlock and stepped out onto the station's hull. The universe opened up around them. Billions of stars in every direction. The cold was immediate and absolute. The silence total. Jake activated his magnetic boots and started walking. Each step was slow and deliberate. One wrong move and they would float off into space. Behind him, Sophie and Ethan followed, using the tether lines to stay connected. They walked across the outside of the station, their path lit only by their helmet lights and the distant stars. Jake tried not to think about the fact that only a thin layer of fabric stood between him and instant death. Tried not to think about the radiation levels. Tried not to think about anything except putting one foot in front of the other. After 15 minutes that felt like hours, they found another airlock. This one led into a section the Syndicate had abandoned. Jake cycled them through and they stumbled into the corridor, hearts pounding, hands shaking. They had made it. They were behind enemy lines. Jake led them through the abandoned section following the station maps on his tablet. He could hear Syndicate soldiers ahead, preparing for their next assault on the safe zone. The soldiers had no idea Death was walking up behind them. They found 10 soldiers in a corridor checking their weapons and armor. Jake signaled the others. They had to hit fast and hard. No mercy, no hesitation. These soldiers wanted to kill 200 innocent people. That made this easy. Jake came around the corner firing. His rifle barked 3 times. 3 soldiers fell. The others spun around in confusion. Sophie shot 2 more before they could react. Ethan took down another. The remaining 4 soldiers returned fire. Plasma bolts sizzled past Jake's head so close he could feel the heat. He dove behind cover and came up shooting. Beside him, Sophie fired with mechanical precision. Ethan moved to flank them. The fight lasted 30 seconds. When it was over, all 10 Syndicate soldiers lay unconscious or wounded on the floor. Jake checked them quickly. All alive but out of the fight. Good enough. But Ethan had taken a plasma bolt to the shoulder. The wound was bad, bleeding heavily. Sophie's suit had taken damage too. A hole burned through the side. They needed to fall back. They retreated toward the safe zone, supporting Ethan between them. They had succeeded in thinning the enemy numbers, but at a cost. Jake hoped it was worth it. Back at the safe zone, Maya worked frantically on the wounded. Both human and alien casualties were mounting. She had patients lined up, waiting for treatment. Alex helped where he could, holding instruments, applying bandages, moving patients. When Jake's team stumbled back in, Maya saw Ethan's wound and her heart sank. She had him lie down immediately and started working. The plasma burn was deep, but it had missed the major blood vessels. Lucky. He would live. He would hurt for a while, but he would live. While Maya worked, Sophie checked the station's sensors. What she saw made her blood run cold. She called Jake and Hayes over. Showed them the readings. The fusion reactor was overloading. Someone had sabotaged it. In 30 minutes, it would explode. The entire station would be destroyed. Everyone aboard would die. Sophie traced the sabotage back to Vex's last orders. He had decided that if he could not win, nobody would. If he was trapped here, he would take the humans and all the witnesses with him. Jake felt sick. They had fought so hard, saved so many people, and now it was all for nothing. The Coalition fleet was still 90 minutes away. Too far, too late. Hayes looked at the countdown timer, looked at the 200 civilians depending on them, looked at her students who had already risked everything. She called them together for an emergency meeting. She laid out the options. None of them were good. They could try to evacuate everyone, but there were not enough escape pods. The captured Syndicate ship could hold maybe 50 people. The rest would die. They could send everyone to stop the reactor, but that would leave the civilians defenseless against the remaining Syndicate forces. They could surrender and hope Vex showed mercy, but nobody believed he would. The students listened in silence. Then Jake spoke. He had a fourth option. They split their forces again. Half would hold the safe zone. Half would go to the reactor. They would not leave anyone behind. They would not surrender. They would do both. It was insane, impossible. They were already stretched too thin, but looking around at each other, the students realized they had already done several impossible things today. Why stop now? They voted. For the third time that day, the vote was unanimous. Yes, they would do both. They would save everyone or die trying. Hayes would lead the defensive team. Carter, Zoe, Ryan, Mia, and Alex would stay with her. Their job was to hold the line no matter what. Protect the civilians. Keep them alive until the reactor was fixed or they all died together. Jake would lead the reactor team. Maya, Kyle, Sophie, Nina, Lucas, and the injured Ethan would go with him. Ethan insisted on coming despite his wound. They needed everyone. Every pair of hands mattered. Before they split up, Maya checked everyone over one more time. Gave out the last of the stimulants to keep them alert. Treated minor wounds. Made them all promise to come back alive. Ambassador Rilvan watched the humans prepare. He tried to find words to thank them. To tell them they had already done more than anyone could ask. But the words stuck in his throat. These children had, The engineering section looked like hell. Jake and his team moved through corridors where the walls glowed red from heat, where radiation warnings flashed in angry patterns, where the air was so thin their emergency breathers struggled to provide enough oxygen. They moved fast, using magnetic boots where gravity had failed completely. Kyle led the way, his natural sense of three-dimensional space helping them navigate the maze of damaged corridors. Nina bypassed sealed doors. Lucas solved engineering problems on the fly. Ethan stumbled, weak from blood loss and pain. Maya caught him with one hand while gripping a structural beam with the other. The feat of strength made Sophie blink in surprise. She knew humans were stronger than coalition species, but seeing it in action was different from knowing it in theory. They encountered a squad of Syndicate soldiers guarding the approach to the reactor. 5 soldiers in full combat gear, stationed in a corridor that still had gravity and atmosphere. Jake did not hesitate. They had no time for strategy or clever tactics. They had 12 minutes left. The fight was fast and brutal. Jake came around the corner firing. Kyle threw a piece of debris that hit one soldier's helmet hard enough to crack it. Sophie shot with mechanical precision. Nina used the low gravity to bounce off walls at impossible angles. Lucas grabbed a soldier twice his size and used momentum to throw him into a wall. The Syndicate soldiers fell. The humans did not stop. Did not slow down. Just kept moving toward the reactor. 10 minutes left. They reached the reactor chamber. The door was sealed, but Sophie hacked it open in seconds. They stumbled inside and stopped, staring at what waited for them. The fusion reactor was massive. A cylinder of metal and energy that powered the entire station. Now it glowed with unstable light. Warning alarms screamed. The temperature in the chamber was 60 degrees Celsius. Radiation levels were off the scale. The air itself seemed to shimmer with heat. For coalition species, this environment was instant death. Their bodies could not handle the heat or radiation. But humans had evolved under a star that tried to kill them every day, had learned to survive conditions that would destroy other species. Jake stripped off his outer jacket. The heat was intense but bearable. The others did the same. They needed to move freely more than they needed protection from the temperature. Sophie and Nina approached the control console. Their fingers flew across the screens, analyzing the sabotage. What they found made Sophie curse in 3 languages. Vex had not just set the reactor to overload. He had created a cascading lockout. 3 manual overrides, all deep inside the reactor core, all requiring someone to go into the heart of the fusion reaction and fix them by hand. Sophie did the math. Even for a human, exposure to that level of radiation would be fatal. Maybe 5 minutes before the damage became irreversible. 5 minutes to fix 3 problems. It was barely possible. Barely. Jake volunteered immediately. He was the leader. This was his responsibility, but Maya stopped him with a hand on his arm. She looked him in the eyes and told him no, she was the medic. She knew the symptoms of radiation poisoning, knew when to pull out before it was too late. She had studied the station's systems and knew where the lockouts were located. And most importantly, she had taken an oath. To help people. To save lives, even if it cost her own, Jake argued. Tried to order her to stand down, but Maya just smiled sadly and told him that doctors outranked everyone when it came to medical decisions. This was a medical decision. Her decision. She suited up in the heaviest radiation gear they could find. It would help. A little, not enough, but she did not tell them that. She just checked her helmet seals and prepared to enter the reactor core. The others watched her on the monitors as she climbed into the reactor access shaft. Her life signs showed on the screens. Heart rate elevated, radiation exposure climbing, temperature increasing. The first lockout was near the entrance. Maya reached it in under a minute. Her hands shook as she worked the manual controls. The override clicked, 1 down, 2 to go. She climbed deeper into the reactor. The second lockout was harder to reach. She had to descend through a maintenance shaft while being bombarded by radiation that would have killed most species instantly. Her radiation suit's temperature regulation failed halfway down. She kept going anyway. Her hands were shaking badly now. The heat was incredible. Her vision blurred at the edges. But she found the second lockout and worked the controls with fingers that barely responded. The override clicked, 2 down, 1 to go. Outside the reactor, Jake watched the timer. 5 minutes left. Maya's life signs were in the red zone. Her radiation exposure had maxed out the sensors. She should already be dead, but she was still moving, still working, still trying. Maya descended to the reactor's heart. The fusion reaction raged around her, barely contained by magnetic fields. The radiation was so intense her suit's sensors simply gave up and displayed error messages. She could feel it burning through her body, feel her cells dying, feel herself dying. She thought about the 200 civilians waiting to die, thought about her friends fighting to protect them, thought about all the people she had wanted to save in her career as a doctor. If this was her last patient, at least it was 200 patients at once. She found the final lockout. Her burned hands could barely grip the controls. Her vision was tunneling down to a small point of light, but she worked the manual override, felt it click, felt the reactor begin to stabilize, 3 minutes remaining. The countdown stopped. The reactor began its emergency shutdown sequence. Sanctuary 7 would not explode. Everyone would live. Maya collapsed. Over the comm, she whispered to Jake, "Mission accomplished." Then her world went dark. Kyle and Lucas rushed into the reactor core. They found Maya unconscious, her suit's systems failing. They pulled her out as fast as they could without hurting her more. Every second mattered now. They got her back to the control room. Jake held her while Ethan, despite his own injuries, checked her vitals. Her heart was still beating. She was still breathing, but barely. She needed medical treatment that nobody on the station could provide. She needed it soon or she would die. Sophie finished stabilizing the reactor. The danger was over. The station would survive. But they might lose Maya anyway. It did not feel like victory. At the safe zone, the Syndicate forces suddenly received word. The reactor overload was canceled. Their last contingency was gone. Their ships were destroyed. Their leader had trapped them on a station with humans who refused to die. The news spread through the Syndicate ranks like poison. Some soldiers kept fighting. Others started looking for ways to escape. Their organized assault fell apart into chaos. Carter took advantage of their confusion. He pushed forward his plasma cannon singing. Zoe and Ryan flanked the disorganized soldiers. Alex triggered his last improvised device, filling a corridor with blinding light. Hayes led a counterattack that drove the Syndicate forces back. For the first time since the battle began, the humans were winning, but Vex was not done. He watched his operation collapse and felt rage burn through his crystalline form. He had lost everything. His ships, his soldiers, his mission, all because of these impossible humans. If he was going down, he would take at least one of them with him. Vex charged into the safe zone himself. His Corran body could phase through certain materials, could channel energy directly. He was a living weapon, and he was done playing careful. He phased through the barricade and appeared in the middle of the defensive line. Energy crackled around his crystalline form. The civilians screamed. Hayes tried to get a shot, but he was too fast, too unpredictable. Carter saw him and moved to intercept. Vex unleashed a blast of energy that should have killed Carter instantly. But Carter's dense bone structure and natural radiation resistance let him survive. He staggered but stayed on his feet. Vex stared. That should have killed him, should have burned through him like paper. But the human just shook it off and kept coming. They fought. Vex with his energy blasts and phasing abilities. Carter with his strength and stubborn refusal to fall down. It was alien power against human endurance. Experience against determination. Vex knocked Carter down. Carter got back up. Vex hit him with energy that cracked the floor. Carter got back up. Vex used every trick, every power, every advantage, and Carter just kept getting back up. The battle drew everyone's attention. Syndicate soldiers stopped fighting to watch their leader. Coalition civilians watched this impossible human refuse to stay down. Hayes and the other students held their fire, afraid to hit Carter. Carter realized he could not beat Vex with strength alone. He needed to be smart. He saw an exposed electrical conduit in the wall, saw Vex preparing another energy blast, had an idea. He charged at Vex, but at the last second changed direction. Vex tried to phase through the wall to attack from behind. Carter was ready. He grabbed the conduit and ripped it free just as Vex phased through. The exposed electrical current hit Vex's crystalline body as he materialized. His body was designed to channel energy, but not like this. Not all at once. The electricity surged through him. His form glowed bright, then brighter. Then he shattered into 1,000 pieces. The safe zone went silent. Vex was gone. Their leader was dead. The Syndicate soldiers looked at each other and slowly raised their hands in. The Coalition medical ship docked with Sanctuary 7 within minutes. Teams of doctors rushed aboard, their equipment humming with advanced technology. They found Maya first, rushed her onto a stretcher, and carried her to their ship's medical bay. Jake tried to follow, but the doctors told him to wait. They needed space to work. He stood in the corridor, covered in dust and blood, watching them take his friend away. Sophie put a hand on his shoulder. They all felt it. The fear that after everything, Maya might still die. Admiral Vex arrived on the station an hour later. He was old for a Velnari, his body marked with the scars of a long military career. He came expecting to find a massacre. Bodies. Destruction. The usual aftermath of a syndicate attack. Instead, he found 200 civilians alive and safe. Syndicate prisoners locked up and disarmed, a station damaged but intact, and 13 humans sitting in the safe zone, so tired they could barely stand. Ambassador Rilvan gave his report, told the Admiral everything, how the humans had answered the distress call, how they had fought against impossible odds, how these children had done what trained soldiers should do. The Admiral listened, ran the tactical analysis. His computers told him the Syndicate should have won. By every measure, the humans were outgunned. Outnumbered, out of their depth. The simulation said they should have died in the first 10 minutes, but they had not died. They had won, and the Admiral needed to understand how. He met with Hayes first, asked her to explain. She told him about Earth, about the Deathworld that had forged humanity, about the adaptations that seemed small until you needed them, about the mental toughness that came from evolving on a planet trying to kill you. The Admiral had read reports about Earth, had dismissed them as exaggeration. Now looking at what these humans had accomplished, he realized the reports had understated things. Humans were not just tough, they were survivors in a way the Coalition had never seen before. He watched the security footage from the battle, watched humans operate in environments that would kill his people, watched them adapt to every challenge, watched them refuse to give up even when giving up was the logical choice. The footage of Maya entering the reactor core made him stop breathing. No Coalition soldier would have survived that. Most would have died within seconds. But Maya had lasted long enough to fix 3 lockouts and save everyone. It should have been impossible. He asked to meet the students. They gathered in the safe zone, still wearing their damaged gear. Jake stood at the front trying to look calm. The others lined up beside him. Carter, tall and steady. Kyle, still grinning despite exhaustion. Sophie, quiet but present. The rest, equally tired but standing straight. The Admiral looked at them. Really looked. Saw the youth in their faces, the fear they were trying to hide, the bone-deep exhaustion, but also the determination, the strength, the absolute refusal to abandon those who needed help. He told them that what they had done would be studied in military academies for generations, that they had saved 200 lives against odds that should have been impossible, that the Coalition owed them a debt it could never fully repay. Jake did not know what to say to that. He just asked about Maya. The Admiral's expression softened. The doctors were working. They were optimistic but careful. Maya had taken radiation levels that should have killed her. But human biology was tougher than they expected. She had a chance. A good chance. 4 days later, Maya woke up. She was in the Coalition medical ship's intensive care unit, surrounded by monitors and equipment. Her body hurt everywhere. Her skin felt wrong. Her throat was dry, but she was alive. Jake was sitting beside her bed. He had barely left in 4 days. When he saw her eyes open, he smiled so wide it hurt. She tried to smile back, but her face would not cooperate properly. She managed to whisper one question. Did everyone make it? Jake told her yes. All the students were alive. Minor injuries, but nothing serious. All 200 civilians were safe. The syndicate was defeated. The station was being repaired. Everyone made it because of her. Maya closed her eyes in relief. Then she went back to sleep. The doctors said she would recover fully. It would take time, months of treatment, but she would live. She would be fine. News of Sanctuary 7 spread through Coalition space like fire. The story captured imaginations everywhere. 12 human teenagers answering a distress call meant for trained soldiers, fighting against impossible odds, saving 200 lives. It was the kind of story people told each other, the kind that became legend. Media outlets wanted interviews. Governments wanted meetings. Everyone wanted to understand how this had happened, how children had done what soldiers should do. Hayes protected her students from most of it, told the media to wait, told the politicians to be patient. Her kids needed rest, needed time to process what they had been through. The universe could wait, but she could not protect them from the ceremony. The Coalition Council insisted. They wanted to honor the humans properly, wanted to show their gratitude in front of the whole galaxy. The ceremony was held aboard the Luminous Dawn, the Coalition flagship. Representatives from dozens of species attended. The 200 civilians they had saved were there. Media broadcast it to billions of viewers across Coalition space. The students stood in a line wearing their academy uniforms. Maya was there too, in a wheelchair but smiling. They looked nervous, uncomfortable with the attention, but they stood straight and tried to look professional. Admiral Vex presented each of them with the Star of Valor, the highest civilian award the Coalition could give. He pinned the medals on their uniforms one by one, told them they had shown courage beyond measure, had upheld the best ideals of the Coalition, had proven that heroism knew no age or species. When he reached Maya, he paused, looked at her scarred hands and healing face, told her that her sacrifice had shown the entire galaxy what it meant to truly help others, that medical professionals across Coalition space would study what she did, that she had set a standard others would try to match. Maya accepted the medal with shaking hands, whispered that she had just done her job. The Admiral told her that doing your job when it might kill you was the definition of heroism. After the official ceremony, something more personal happened. The 200 civilians came forward one by one, shook hands with the humans, thanked them. Some cried. Some brought gifts. Parents brought their children to meet the people who had saved them. Ambassador Rilvan approached Hayes, told her that he had spent his whole life studying diplomacy, understanding different species, building bridges between cultures. But he had never truly understood humanity until he watched her students fight for strangers. He said that humans scared some Coalition species, their strength, their endurance, their refusal to quit. But after Sanctuary 7, he understood something important. That strength was only scary if used selfishly. Humans used it to protect others. That made them not frightening, but valuable, essential even. Hayes thanked him, told him that her students were good kids. They just needed a chance to prove it. Rilvan smiled and said they had proven more than that. They had proven humanity deserved a place in the Coalition, not as provisional members, as full partners. 2 weeks after the ceremony, Earth received official notification. The Coalition Council had voted. Humanity was granted full membership. All restrictions lifted, all rights granted. Earth was now an equal partner in galactic civilization. The news was celebrated on Earth. Parades, parties, a global holiday. Humanity had made it, had earned their place among the stars. But for the students who had made it possible, the celebration was quieter. They returned to Earth as heroes, met with presidents and prime ministers, were honored in their home cities. But none of it felt quite real. What felt real was the nightmares, the memories of combat, the weight of decisions they had made. They were trained for exploration and diplomacy, not for fighting and dying. The experience had changed them in ways they were still discovering. Hayes made sure they had counselors, support systems, time to process and heal. She knew that physical wounds healed faster than mental ones. Her students needed help and she would make sure they got it. 6 months after Sanctuary 7, the students graduated from the Frontier Academy. All of them passed with honors. Their names were added to the Academy's Hall of Fame. Their actions became part of the curriculum. Future students would learn about them. After graduation, they met one last time as a group, talked about what came next. They had offers from everywhere: military academies, diplomatic corps, research institutions, private companies. Everyone wanted them. But Jake had a different idea. What if they stayed together? What if they created something new? A human response team designed to help coalition members in emergencies. Not soldiers, not conquerors, just people ready to help when help was needed. The others listened, thought about it, realized it made sense. They had proven humans could help in ways coalition species could not. Why not make it official? Why not turn it into something permanent? They pitched the idea to Earth's government, to the Coalition Council. Everyone loved it. 6 months later, the Human Emergency Response Initiative was officially formed. The 12 students were the founding members. Their instructor, now Captain Hayes, was the director.